We finally picked up enough clients for one of us to leave our jobs. He's got 3 kids, I've got 2.
Sure.
So we've got to make a decision here.
Sure.
At the same time, I got an offer to stay
Okay.
at the bank, right?
So you got an offer to stay.
Yeah.
And you got
This
decision you got to make.
Yeah. And my wife is like, oh, so you're going to stay at the bank. Obviously,
okay.
Well, it's kind of what you said, right? It's like, well, it's comfortable. You know what the path is.
Right.
Or you think you know what the path is until you realize that it could be taken away from you.
So, welcome Moez Bawania to the Breaking podcast. It's good to have you here and have you share your story about how, you were able and are still able till today to work on your development by helping others develop or helping others work on their development. So
thank you, Mohammed. Yeah, pleasure to be here and be with someone who inspires me so much.
It's really, I don't know, it's interesting even with our kind of like connection that we've had, right?
Yeah.
From
so crazy.
a soccer field, which neither one of us intended to meet each other on, right? It just, we happened to be on a team together.
Yeah.
And recently I actually looked at that picture again.
Oh, yeah?
It was blue colored shirts, I remember.
Yeah, I
light
think it
blue
was.
colored.
That's so funny.
Right? Like, was that Man City? No.
Yeah,
not exactly like Man City. But yeah, it was a good team. And the team played really well together. And I was like, I always remember, so here's kind of like what I recall of Moez, right? Was like, okay, so there's this really like classy guy who plays D with me.
Yeah. And
never had there was never ever that I ever sensed like a negative vibe coming from you.
Okay.
I'm sure you get this a lot.
No, it's so funny.
If I would
that you
ask
say
your
that,
wife,
but
probably she would say that.
Yeah.
There's never like a negative vibe coming from you. Yeah. And I think that is like, I don't think of it right away, but as I recall, I'm like, yeah, there's never been a negative vibe I get from this guy. And then even after, years go by and somehow on social media we reconnect.
Yes.
You then start this business that you're into today. And we meet a couple of times, I don't know once. And I'm like, obviously this guy is going to do great. Mm-hmm. What I didn't understand or didn't see at all is like, there's if we were to equate it to like water, like there's a surface and it's like calm.
Yeah.
Right? It looks calm up here. Right? And what I didn't know was all of the stuff underneath that it's like, you have an interesting past and I can see now why you might even have a doubt about something.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, okay. I find that so interesting because a lot of times when people just look at us, they don't know like the rest of it. So if somebody were to have met you today, like I was shocked when you talked about, was it in one of your, somewhere I read or you said it to me about when you were growing up and how things were back then.
Yeah.
So were you born here?
I was born in Dubai. But it's, by the way, interesting about soccer because, even though you're saying like I was, came across with a positive vibe, right. I'm so competitive in my mind.
Really?
I'm just like, angry because you want to win that game.
You never showed it.
But so I think that's what it is, right? Is like, but outwardly you're trying to be stable and patient and calm because there's a team.
But were you actually processing that? Okay, I'm mad and I'm not going to show it? Or were you just like, was this how you dealt with it? Because me, when we were playing on a soccer field, I would show it, man. Yeah. I would be like, oh, over here.
I got a great vibe from you, though. I got like that's why I always thought of you as like the leader of the team by action and then also by words. And for me, it was just more like, just do your thing, play a good game, and don't let your team down. So I don't know if it was intentional that way, but I feel like I always said, okay, outwardly, I don't want to get angry at people because I know it can demotivate them and get them down. But internally, I was going through all these things.
You were, eh?
Of course.
I don't know. It just looked like it was like you were, so like it's like the deeply intelligent that don't ever get out of their sorts, and their temperament is great. So you've had all that. That's my image of you anyway. But you were saying Dubai, so that's where you were born.
Born in Dubai.
Okay.
Yeah. We moved to Canada when I was 7.
7, okay.
Yeah. So grade 1.
So was Dubai at that time like what Dubai is today? Or was
It
it still like
was-
this, like, this place in the desert somewhere? I don't think it was that.
No, it wasn't at that
Built
time.
up
In,
like
in the mid '80s, it was not built up yet. I think that was closer to like early '90s.
Yeah.
Maybe?
So you never tasted the glitz of Dubai or saw the glitz of Dubai, or was it still there around that time?
I was so young. I was like, less than 7.
Yeah. What
so
do you
my
recall?
my glitz of Dubai was that's taking me so far back.
So like the
I have
Range
these,
Rovers
like-
now everywhere,
yeah,
and Lamborghinis.
exactly. No, there
was
was
there?
none of
There
that.
wasn't any of that.
I think we had a Datsun, if you remember. What a
Yeah, I know what a
was.
Datsun is. Yeah, I remember.
It was.
I shouldn't say I remember, but
like
I
the
remember.
Toyota Corolla right now.
Yeah.
But my memories from Dubai are my parents in the house of a family in the neighborhood. Because Indians, there was some Indians there, and there was a growing population of sort of these immigrant workers coming to
Yes.
Dubai to make a living.
Yeah.
And so every Friday night we would go over to one of my dad's friend's house, and he would have like a tabla and a harmonica.
Yeah.
And they would be in a circle, and they would all be singing songs and playing music, and it would be this like really fun get together. And the kids would at the time be playing Atari.
Of course. Yeah. Oh my
and
God.
Other games that probably no longer exist today. So those are my memories of Dubai. It's sort of like that really family and community feel with immigrants that had come over.
Yeah, I hear that a lot because you couldn't really, with the rest of society, there was such a huge disconnect, a huge gap.
Yeah.
So then the ones that you do know are even more intimately connected, right?
Exactly.
So you leave that and you come over straight to Canada, was it?
Yeah, we came straight to Canada, and my father was a banker in Dubai.
Okay.
But you come here, obviously, and you don't have Canadian
Don't have
experience.
Canadian experience. I remember that one.
Yeah, we can go through that, right?
Yeah.
And you don't have a Canadian education.
Right.
And so you're like, you come with some money because you know that you have to start a business, and that's how you get accepted.
Okay.
And you're doing it for your kids' education, right?
Right.
So, like a lot of Indians back then, it was a convenience store. So Gateway Cigar Store in Markville Mall. That was
Stop. That was you guys started that?
That was us. Yeah.
No way.
I feel like we didn't start it, but we had bought it. But it was one of the.
Yeah.
We were probably like the second or third owner. It was quite early on.
Okay.
And now that mall has really evolved. So yeah, I have some early memories as like a very young child. Stalking, the
We'd go work
convenience
at our
store
dad's,
stuff.
whatever
Yeah,
they
exactly. You do that.
Yeah.
And and then we moved to Thorncliffe Park.
So when you had just moved, right? How old were you at that time?
7.
So you're 7. So what grade is that? Like 3 or 2 or something?
I think that's like grade 1 going into 2.
Yeah. How was that like?
You come here, your English isn't very good. So right away it's like, well, ESL, English as a second language.
Okay, so you did take ESL.
Well, that was...
Listening to you talk right now, you're an ESL student. That's interesting.
exactly.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah, I think we weren't actually placed in ESL, but they were sort of talking to us about that, right? And saying, let's assess you. And so it's such a different experience than in Dubai, where you're like, I think we were in a private Montessori school.
Yes.
And then you come here and, it's sort of a shift just because of where you are. And of course, you feel like an outsider. There's a bunch of people that have been friends, from junior kindergarten onwards, and we're coming into this environment.
So Kings of the Hill to...
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, to the new kids on the block.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
And back then, those guys were popular.
Yeah.
Yeah, the new kids on the block.
That's right. That's right. That's why we like them so much.
Yeah, that's right.
So there's this, right away, there's this gap in the language, and that's not your only challenge.
No, back then, and I don't talk about this a lot, but I had a stammering problem as well.
Okay.
I still do a little bit. And so when you are already at a bit of a disadvantage with your English language skills, and then you have this sort of stammer when you get, I feel like I think faster than I speak.
Really?
So when I try to speak and catch up to my thinking, and if I don't manage that, then I start going down this path, right?
Okay.
Or at least I did when I was a kid. And so I have a whole story about that I could share if you want. But so,
this is the time that you were 7 years old, 6 years old, you moved here.
Yeah, grade 1.
Is that when you start realizing that this is, or you ever feel like there's something different about me aside from the language? Is there ever, like, was it such a, like, amplified to you? Was it so amplified to you? Or how did you realize, or how did you think that you had a stammering thing that you...
Well, I think that definitely it was pronounced enough
Okay.
that the first time I realized it was when I was made fun of.
Okay.
And I was in grade 2. I can remember this still, like it's in my mind. And
Yeah.
there's some couple of kids on the side.
Uh-huh.
And we used to play this game called spying on other people.
Okay.
And so I was part of this game. So
Okay.
I am a victim, but I'm also a culprit,
Okay.
right? Because I would be in the position where if somebody else was doing something, I'd be like, look, let's spy on that person.
Okay.
And then we would sort of laugh. And then I was now subject to being the victim. And so it's
Okay.
very interesting being in that position. And then you're like, wow, that's such a cruel thing to do, to be a culprit, because
Yeah.
now I feel what it's like to be a victim, especially when it's sometimes even your own friends
Yeah.
that are doing that to you. So that was when I sort of knew as a kid that I had this thing that I had to deal with.
Okay.
Then I had to go to these speech therapy classes, Wednesdays at 3:30 p.m. There would be an announcement in school saying, Moez, please come down to the office.
No. Okay. It would be come down to the office.
Come down to the office. But like everybody knew that
Oh.
Moez is going down for the speech therapy class.
Oh, okay.
But it's like, my class. And so they announced it for a couple of times and then I just knew, so they wouldn't announce it. But it was embarrassing because everybody
course.
knows this guy is going to this special class to
Right.
take, to work on this problem that he has.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was sort of where I felt, okay, that's a bit different.
Huh.
Yeah.
And so as you're going through it, you talked about the kind of like the reactions or the behavior of others towards this particular sort of, I'll say characteristic or quality. I consider a quality that you can think faster than the average person. It's
Yeah.
kind of like how I see it now, right?
Yeah.
But you think fast. That's a good thing. But obviously, right? That's not what they're going to say.
No, for sure. What I will say is that experience taught me a lot, Mohammed, because going to the speech therapy class,
Right.
now I'm around 5 or 6 other kids
Okay.
that have it way worse than me.
Okay.
So when you're in your little bubble and your friends who don't have that issue,
Right.
then you have it like really bad.
Right.
And then you go into this environment and you're like, everybody is the same,
Right.
but actually has it even more difficult than you do. And then you kind of thank your lucky stars for where you're at. And you say, how am I going to help others as well? How can I be someone here who's like positive? Like I was thinking about that as like a
Really?
kid.
Really?
Yeah, because I
You
saw this
noticed
kid.
that?
Well, I could see myself in them. And I'm like, if I have it bad as a victim,
Right.
how bad does this kid have it at school? Like I couldn't even imagine that. Right. So I could remember even now, like at that early age, I was like trying to talk to some of the other kids, but also being self-conscious and saying, I don't really want to be here. I don't belong here. There's all these conflicting feelings you have of ego,
Right.
pride,
Right.
defensiveness, and then
Right.
also, kind of trying to use that in a positive way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I understand it 100% when you say it that way, but it's funny you talk about the spy game, right?
Yeah.
And the culprit and the victims, and you participate. We all did. It's a playground, right? It's a playground, and we didn't read books back then on all these things that we've read since then, on etiquettes or behaviors or whatever. So we're kids and we're new to this whole place. So we got all this adjusting to do. So we're looking for our successes wherever we find them. And even if it means going to the level of, okay, well, there's a victim, let me feel strong by doing this.
Yeah.
So it's very common that it happened, but when it's on you started talking about it, but then you didn't tell me the whole story. So I was curious about that. Like the first time I remember, and so they're like talking about you on that playground.
Yeah. So actually, it was in the classroom, and I just noticed it, right? Because it was one of my friends who would normally be with me.
Okay.
I just sort of noticed him in this sort of other group. And then I got this like feeling of like, whoa, I just kind of like, it just pulled the carpet from underneath me.
What do you mean?
Because you feel like, okay, because you have a friend circle, let's say you have like 2 or 3 people, right? And then one of those people now is with the people that are
like a betrayal kind of.
It's like a betrayal.
Oh, okay.
And when you're 7, that's everything to you, right? You're like, oh, my 2 best friends in the whole wide world, I was going to conquer everything with them, and now one of them is spying on me. But that didn't last long. Actually, him and I are good friends today.
Of course, you're still, knowing
Right,
you're friends
which-
with it,
well-
and you make good out of it, right? But
the part about
at that moment,
at that moment it was tough. The part about the stammering that I think now, when I look back and I talk to some people about this who have the same issue that they've dealt with, is
right?
it enhanced my vocabulary
Yeah.
beyond the level that most people have, because I had to find words to switch out for words that I more frequently stammer on.
Okay.
So
that's the strategy.
Unbelievable, right?
Huh.
And so now, if I'm trying to write something, I can probably come up with wording pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And I see that it's difficult for others because they haven't had to deal with this. And it was painful growing up because I had to always find a switch. But it's this thing, years and years of doing that has kind of created this vocabulary and this ability to do that.
Yeah, you've mastered it.
Well, I didn't really think about it that way
Yeah.
until like probably a couple of years ago.
Right.
When I was starting to talk to a couple of people with the same quality, as you called it. And when we started talking to each other, and I said, well, what do you see as the positive out of that? Because I'm always trying to look for that
Sure.
now. As an entrepreneur, I feel like you just have to look for positives. There's so many, ways not to be positive. So that's when I started to realize, my vocabulary got much, bigger, and I'm actually much more calm and patient when I speak now because I've practiced that for 15, 20 years.
So when you go back to that time you talk about in the classroom, and you have this sense of betrayal, it's funny. It doesn't necessarily have to happen just when you're 7. It can happen like that at any
for sure.
At any age. Sometimes whether you're a teenager or even a full-grown adult, you think somebody's on your side, and then all of a sudden you see them on the other side of something. So that never really changes, but I think it's way more. It feels like the end of the world when you're 7 years old, man.
Totally
and you remember
does,
that.
yeah.
And then so what? You just next day you just back to friends again, or how? Like what happened next?
Yeah, so I don't think it was that immediate for me, especially.
Right.
For him, it kind of might have been because he didn't see it as a big deal. Because when you're not the victim, you don't see it as a big deal. So it's once you're in that, and so I think for me, it was just like, okay,
So
now
he comes right back to you the next minute, like, hey, what's up?
Yeah.
And you're like,
I was like, yeah. So because you can sort of see them, and then you that's how this game works.
Okay.
Right. That you sit there and you spy, and then you kind of laugh, and then you've done it, so you know what the game's like. But it took. I think it probably took a few weeks, and then I was sort of back to normal, and he didn't do it again. It was just and it was just once.
Okay.
But imagine now, 30 years later.
yeah,
I remember that one time where it was like 3 minutes or whatever it was.
right.
So yeah.
That's interesting. So when you were going to these classes, I found that an interesting reflection as well. So this is something that you're going through while you're going through school.
Yeah.
And while you're going through these classes, you first, like you say, you first realize, okay, I'm in this circumstance, and I'm gonna, and there are people here to support me and to help me. That's also a really reassuring thing.
Yes.
At the same time, to even have that is a big blessing. But when you're going through it, tell me more about it, because I got to say, it doesn't matter if it's that or anything else. Yeah. To me, it's like when we're in those moments where we're like, okay, we feel that we're the underdog in some way, right? Or it's definitely not a level playing field right now. Yeah. I'm at a disadvantage. What were the thoughts like when you're going through that as a young person? I mean, did you say, yeah, I'm going to conquer this thing, or like, how did it feel?
You told me you were going to dig deep, huh? This is because I haven't really
I got to tell you,
to,
because for me, I've been there as well. Yeah. And I know when you talk about, like, for example, just not being able to speak the language, that's challenging enough in the years that we first arrived to Toronto in Canada. Yeah. And it was new for a lot of people to see somebody who didn't speak the language so well as they did, who didn't know all the cultural stuff that they know, race, religion, so many of these other kind of things, cultures, right? Not being as, today is the internet, just YouTube, and you see everything you want or whatever. Yeah. But back then it wasn't the same. And what I find is that learning from each person in terms of what their immediate reactions were and how they went from that before the moment they picked up
Yeah.
I find that to be interesting because I think that's very helpful to me and to a lot of people. Most people skip over that part.
Yes, for
Because they're
sure.
like, either they don't want to relive it,
Yes.
but what I find is that when I look back on it, I kind of see like that as like the moment that you earned your badge, man.
Yeah.
Like it's a real. That's when the true champion is made in that moment. It's I always say like the champions are like get the trophy later, but the champion was made in that moment. And I look at these moments over and over and over again, because I'm like, yeah, wow, that was not easy, man. And it reminds you that if you can do that, the other stuff looks easy.
For sure, yeah.
But maybe it was easy.
I definitely agree with you. Even as a 7-year-old coming to Canada, not really knowing what is Canada about.
Yeah.
Being able to go to those classes back then, it was actually, I hated going to those classes initially because it's this thing that pulls you away from normal.
Yes.
And takes you away from what everybody else is doing, and everybody knows that you're going, right? But over time, as you see that going to that, being around others that are, have this shared lived experience that you do, it actually made me so grateful for going there. It was strange just over time. And I actually realized, because I think my parents had mentioned, they're like, oh, this is covered. And I'm like, I don't really know what that meant, but it's paid for basically. Right. So I had a taxi that used to pick me up. So they would frame it in a positive way. They'd say, look, you get a taxi, picks you up from, it's like a chauffeur, takes you to this place.
Right.
And this therapist, who is probably being paid quite well per hour, is spending time with you and 6 other people. And we've applied for this program for you. So it's for my parents to even admit that their kid had to go through this is probably a big deal. To talk to the school about it as Indian parents who are always like, high achieving and, don't talk about what's hard.
Right.
Talk about how you're going to figure that out and be successful. So for them to probably admit that their kid was going through this couldn't have been easy.
But you hated it to start with.
Yeah, hated to start with, but got there, and through listening to what they were saying and my own realizations, I was like, wow, it made me really grateful for Canada. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
that, like, to me, like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Like, that's, I think, where I got my, like, real passion for Canada was through that. And then obviously, as you grow up and you reflect on the opportunities you got as a family, your parents, and your education, and the passport, because I've traveled quite a bit after that and seen what that Canadian passport does for you, and how people respect it.
Right.
That also kind of gave me that. But anyways, going back to that time and how I felt, I have to think about that for a second because I haven't really thought about it in too much detail. I have to go back there.
Yeah.
So I remember the taxi would drop you off. You would go upstairs, a flight of stairs. And you would sit in like a waiting room with these other kids as well. And the first time, you're there, you're not talking to each other. You don't actually want to be there with this other person, right? Because you're like, I'm not like you. You're not like me. I don't have that problem. In your mind, you don't want to think that you have a problem, right? You're just here. I don't know why I'm here.
So the starting point is that you have a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not really here for anything. I just need to go home. Like I'm here because somebody told me to be here.
Oh, got it.
And so we're all
like
in
denial, kind of like.
Yeah, it's honestly, it's like sometimes going to like a therapist.
Right.
I mean, that was a therapy.
Yeah.
It was a speech therapy, or so if you're going for a therapy of some other kind.
Sure.
You're like, usually if it's like, couples therapy, one person kind of wants to be there, the other person's like, I don't know why we're here. We're all good.
Yeah, 100%.
Right?
Yeah.
So I was like, so we were all that person in that relationship pretty much. Like, we're all good. But as time goes on and you start talking to the therapist and you're like, oh, wow, I'm not actually, I have some opportunities here and I can see what success looks like.
So you go from, you actually experience denial.
Yeah, basically.
To then acceptance of, I got some work to do here.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think when you, they would ask you,
what converted you
into that
from thinking that. So like the first step is like like we feel or we hear some's not right, some's wrong, and then obviously nobody wants to be wrong. So no, I'm not wrong. There's nothing wrong with me, right? So there's that.
Yeah.
And then there's like I'm going to work. It doesn't just happen. Like, do you recall? Like, was it like what finally starts getting you to think that, to accept, because that's the beginning of the progress right there. That's where success starts.
Yeah. I think that it does come down, I know we've talked about this a lot, to people. The people around you, it comes down to the encouragement from your parents, and you just trust the process.
There it is again.
Yeah, you see the therapist, and you think they're going to be tough on you in a way, or like be like your friends, you know, maybe who spy on you or whatever else, but actually they're so supportive. And so the first couple of times you're like, this is not real, right? This is not real. There's some ulterior motive here. You're not sure about their intentions.
Okay, that's how it felt, right? Okay.
Yeah, at the beginning, you're not sure, right? You're like, am I here because I honestly thought, I'm like, is this like a government program? So this is, as a 7-year-old, when you're reading these crazy, like, you know, chapter books and you're just starting out. And you're like, is this like a government program to bring all of us together and like condition us? And honestly, I thought about all these things because I was going into this room with all these people, and they had this whole approach that we had to go through. And then over time, I kind of realized that, okay, you know what, this is, so I think when you see the evidence, you know, I'm an analytical thinker, I think. I'm an accountant, right? So I like kind of add up all the numbers and say, does this all, you know, reconcile?
Right.
So when I take it back and I was sort of actioning it, the approach, I could see it working.
Okay.
With, you know, my classmates and in life. And so then I went back and I said, okay, I'm going to give it, you know, a shot.
Interesting. And then after that is when you started seeing, like, so now you're like engaging. Before you were not even engaging.
That's right.
And then you start engaging. And when you first start engaging in it, in any sort of self-development, and this is really all it is. At the end of the day, it's a form of self-development. For people who've got great qualities, who think faster than they say something, okay. I still don't see the problem, right? But you start engaging, and you start now sort of saying, okay, now I'm going to work on these things. Did you at any time when you're looking at this ask yourself, like, how am I going to get to the end, or have any doubts about changing the condition or being able to see that progress? Or did you see progress and saw like, oh, there we go, there's my path?
No, actually, that's a great question. Because there were people on the spectrum at different places.
Right.
There was almost this fear of getting to a more challenging place if you don't take care of it.
Right.
Right? And that's what I had heard as well from therapists, was that like, if you are able to implement some of these practices and really try, then you're able to train your mind to think this way.
Okay.
You can get better. And it's like a huge, exponentially better sort of place than you are today, because you're young enough that we can take care of it. But so that you can see other kids, right? And you're like, okay. So yeah, it wasn't. These kind of going back to the sort of the point of how did I get to that place? Right. It was a fear of not getting worse in a way.
Okay.
Because you could see that around you. Sure. And then also, I think over time, being the underdog that you described before, you're like, you have to find it within you, right? So even as a kid, it was this sort of like defensiveness that I had within myself. So I'm like, I'm going to be the one to make it work, even if everybody else is sort of saying.
There's the competitor starting.
Yes, exactly. And maybe that's some of the, stuff that went up on the soccer field. It comes back. That guy. And he says, no, I'm going to be the one. I don't want to lose this, because I've seen what really, really bad can look like.
But I love how you just used like fear in a really cool way. I mean, whenever we're in a tough position, you just said, like, it was profound, that if you didn't do something, there's the fear of it will get worse then.
Yeah.
And that pushes you to get out of this position. That's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think now that I think about it, as in, when you're in business or in life, right? Whatever you're doing, when you can sort of, because you've been down that path before, not just with this, but other things in life, failures, or as we call them, opportunities, right? When you've experienced some of the lows and you know how it can go, and you start to notice the triggers on the way down, then you start to realize, okay, I better catch that early, because I know how low I can go.
Okay.
especially when you've gone down that path a
And
couple
you're
of times.
seeing others that are kind of like worse off in some ways.
Exactly.
Right in front of you.
For sure.
To the point where you're even thinking you could mentor them and help them. So you're seeing yourself as a potential like source as being able to help them.
That's the
so
part
that you
that
don't
I-
have to focus on your own.
Yeah, maybe, right?
I don't
Maybe
know.
that's what it
I'm
is now.
wondering. Is that
I wonder. Yeah, that's a good question. I remember very distinctly when I was at Wilfrid Laurier, and it was our undergrad, and it was my first co-op term. There was an ambassador from one of the schools. I no names, but I'm sure if he's watching, he'll probably know who he is. And he had stammering sort of problem, right? So I was like, I kind of identified. I said, this is awesome, because I feared I would not even get a job because I'm in an interview and I stammer once or twice, and they're like, I'm never putting this guy in front of a client.
okay?
That's how bad it was, And so when I see this guy, and I'm like, oh wow, he's at this like senior manager position at like a Big Four firm. So I go up and I talk to him, and I stammered during that conversation, and it was
This is
weird.
years after.
This is like I'm like 18, 19 years old, and I just noticed like a bit of a change in his behavior, and it was just I felt again it was like this betrayal.
What do you
I'm
mean?
like, this guy's like me in a way, or at least I thought I was like him.
Okay.
But he sort of like turned away and he talked to somebody else. Now maybe I'm inferring something from that. Maybe I don't know. I smelled or something else. I don't know. I just thought it was odd that like in that moment, as soon as I had that, he sort of seemed to be disengaged. And I felt what you just said is maybe he didn't want to deal with the fact that there's someone like him, and that it's like a subconscious reaction to people like you because you don't want to recognize that part of yourself.
Yeah.
But kind of twisting that the other way is, like you said, why are you now trying to share with others or talk to others about it?
Well, what's that saying? Familiarity breeds contempt or something?
Yeah, something like that, right? Maybe that's what it is. I think in my case, it's almost like a therapeutic thing for me to talk about it with others.
Yeah.
It's almost the opposite. It's like I want to now talk about it. If I notice somebody who has it, I've had this in a couple of conversations where I would say, hey, are you okay if we talk about this? And the person was like, oh, I'm so glad you asked me.
Wow.
But like, you don't want to ever impose it on like anyone to talk about things that they don't want to, but you want to ask permission.
Sure.
And then we have this like, half an hour long conversation. There's some emotions as part of that. And that person says like, wow, I can't believe that you have gone through this journey that I've gone through as well, and that you've been so successful. This thing like we've talked about.
Right.
You haven't seen all the ups and downs that it takes to get to even there, and then one day I'll probably be back down again and still have to fight back. So.
Well, there's a saying like fall down 6 times, get up 7.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Just all you need is that's it. So there's almost like we were talking to somebody else just earlier on, and they were talking about just like character building days. It's a character building day.
That's
I love
right.
it. So
I like that.
So you start seeing some success at some point in time. You start seeing some progress. And usually there are like results that we want to get. We talk about being results oriented. You see this all over resumes. I wonder about that. So you having the analytical mind, right? You see progress starting to take place, and you're motivated now. You work a little bit harder at it. Did you ever get to a point where you didn't see the progress that you wanted to see?
Yeah, for sure. I remember in terms of career and work, I kind of knew when I went to university that I wanted to go into accounting. Okay. So I wanted to be at a Big Four firm. And I really would go to all those mixers and do all these different things. And so some of my friends were getting into these firms, and I wasn't right away.
Okay.
So I
Does it
definitely
all come back, the memories?
Yeah, for sure.
Really?
It does. Yeah.
Okay. In spite of the high grades, the good grades, and all the other stuff.
Yeah, and so I wondered why. Actually, I wondered why. But what? Kind of going back to where you didn't see the progress. That's fine. I sort of got into the accounting firm eventually, and I kept kind of my head down, and then it kind of got to a point where I remember growing up, my parents were like really into volunteering, to the point where we'd be like dragged around to all these different events and like volunteering and doing stuff. And so I feel like I wanted to do that more. Right. So progress, I was measuring a bit differently for myself. It was about purpose and impact, maybe, as opposed to like money.
Right.
When I was 16, I remember, because my wife found this paper that I had written when I was 16, and it had my like life goals on it.
Really?
It was like, make $1 million by the age of 30. No. Become a professional hockey player.
Oh, nice.
No, but those two, I could have made 10 million if I had done that. And then it was like other stuff about helping people with education, and there was and that stuff somehow like drew me to it, right? When I read the paper, and I said that's where I probably didn't feel the impact as much. So when I was working at the Big Four consulting firm, there was an opportunity to go to Egypt and Syria for 9 months.
Okay.
But I would pretty much be foregoing a promotion. I would basically not be paid a salary.
Right.
And I would have to go. But it was this thing that the consulting firm was offering you to go partner with like a development organization and do. So yeah, that was where I said, I have to, try this for myself.
Okay.
And, make this leap, go into the unknown where I don't really know Arabic anymore. As being in Dubai as a kid, I learned how to count to like 10.
Sure.
So yeah, I sort of had to make that leap to be able to, I think, achieve that sense of purpose that I was looking for.
And so eventually you start seeing these kind of like, you see progress, you see you're getting somewhere, you're playing on a soccer field, you're winning games, you're getting championships, right? And but then there comes now the next phase, right? So you've gone through all this experience. You feel like, okay, now you have what it takes. And then you start you leave all of that.
Yeah.
Oh, before you leave all of that, I mean, a lot of people who start down that path, it's an interesting, like sort of future there, right? There's a if you stay here this many years and you'll get to this and you'll be called to this, and you'll get to hang with these kind of people and you'll be seen this way. You obviously knew this. I mean, you worked hard to get into like whatever you called it, the Big Four, whatever it's called.
Yeah.
And then what? You worked all this hard to get in, and now what? You don't want it anymore? Like, what happened there?
The funny thing is that I wanted to travel a lot.
Okay.
So in consulting, after, I went to the UK for a year on this forensic investigation, and there I traveled a lot, around Europe, and I was just pining for home. Like I got to the point where I just wanted to be back home.
Okay.
I actually met my now wife in the UK, so I can't complain about all the traveling because it kind of got me to where we are now with our family. But going back to your question, but what happened there? So I left the consulting firm to go to a bank to help build out their anti-money laundering program.
Okay.
Because I wanted to see the impact of our work in consulting.
Okay.
What you do is it's like you go in quick, assess, make recommendations, and then you usually leave.
Right.
If you're staying, it's rare, but you're still leaving after like a year or two. At the bank, right, you're going to stay there for 5-7 years. You're going to feel the impact of decisions you're making on like different people on the organization, and that's what I wanted to feel.
Okay.
Plus, there was no traveling. So I'd be in Toronto, and if you want to plan for a family, you can do that.
Sure.
So that's sort of the progression there in corporate, and then it got to like 2019. And I had met my business partner, Ali. He was also an executive at TD Bank.
Okay.
This is 2018, but we met at like a dance class for our kids.
Okay.
He met my wife because they were dancing in this class with like the kids, and then she introduced me to him. The rest is history. We're talking about our careers, and I'm telling him how I have this like dream of one day being an entrepreneur. He tells me that's weird. I do too. We actually grew up in the same neighborhood but never knew each other. And now we live like 5 minutes from each other, which is kind of interesting as well. But he had left TD. I continued on.
And he was not born in Dubai.
He was not born in.
Okay, all right, that's
Actually,
cool. That's all right.
That's a good question. I think he was born in.
Come on,
in like Tanzania. I should probably know that.
Right,
but
that would be crazy.
Yeah, he's from Africa. That would be funny. But I felt at that point I was kind of like reflecting on what I want to do in life, Mohammed, and just the way that I work and what can be achieved.
You're making progress. Everything is going well.
Yeah. So everything is going well. So what had happened, and again, things that you don't share with everybody, but with you somehow. So at TD Bank, there was a reorganization of our department.
Okay.
And at that time, I was sort of told, look, that role that you're in is no longer available.
Okay.
But there's going to be other roles that you can apply for an interview for. So I said, whoa, this is I had some failures.
Friend again.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Sounds like it.
It sounds like, everything's
just
going well.
pulls the carpet?
I was promoted pretty quickly into a senior role, and I was being told that I was again being groomed for another, senior
Yeah.
role, and then you're like, boom, pulled from underneath you. So at that point, you realize I don't control my destiny here. It was something in the back of my mind that I said, I don't control my destiny here as much as I maybe thought I was.
Okay.
I had an incredible leader who was my boss, and I learned a ton from him. And if I was continuing to work from him, I probably would have just kept working. But he had decided to move on somewhere else as well.
Okay.
And so that was my opportunity. So internally, I interviewed for a couple of different roles.
Okay.
At the same time, Ali and myself are talking about what's happening in the accounting world, cloud technologies, innovation.
Sure.
Then we start to adopt some of these and create a bit of a practice around it. And then we start to take on a couple of clients, small business clients on the side.
Okay.
And so we're doing that while I'm looking for these other roles, because I'm trying to now figure out, should I leave or should I stay?
Right.
And then we finally picked up enough clients for one of us to leave our jobs. He's got 3 kids, I've got 2.
Sure.
So we've got to make a decision here.
Sure.
At the same time, I got an offer to stay
Okay.
at the bank, right?
So you got an offer to stay,
Yeah.
and you got a
This
decision you got to
thing.
make.
Yeah. And my wife is like, oh, so you're going to stay at the bank. Obviously.
Okay.
Well, it's kind of what you said, right? It's like, well, it's comfortable. You know what the path is.
Right.
Or you think you know what the path is until you realize that it could be taken away from you.
Any moment.
So that's when I was kind of sharing what I saw in the field and the possibilities. Of course, as you know well, you're taking a big risk.
Yeah.
But my father took a big risk coming here, and my risk is nothing compared to his. Right? Like, he came here without Canadian experience or education, and he had to build it up. And if his failed, his entire family, we'd be on the street pretty much. Whereas for me, I could go back and get a job if I really wanted to at some point. You know what I mean? So being analytical, I guess, is like the floor was much higher for me. And I could see myself experimenting, trying it out, and seeing where I land after 2 years. But of course, you have to plan your cash flow and everything else accordingly. But that's how I made the leap.
Interesting. And so that's not even knowing that when we had talked.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So now I'm even more sure that you obviously you did it right. You've thought it through so well. But then why did you even have any doubts about it to begin with? So now I'm even more perplexed that you would even have a doubt about it when you started your business.
Well, like you said, you're doing pretty well. Like, transparently, you've got a 6-figure salary and perks, and it's a nice title. Every month you see the paycheck come in and you feel good. Everything's covered.
Right.
And in a business, because I've been through it. We've been in the back of the van going to Montreal with our sports cards, hockey cards, baseball cards, sleeping on them on the mat, delivering somewhere, coming back because this was like a friend of my dad's and he was a vendor. The next day it's a competitor. Like, I've seen the cutthroat nature of business, and I've seen the ups and downs too. And so for me, it wasn't as cut and dry because I've gone through some of the, what I might call, although it's probably exaggerating, but kind of like the traumatic events of entrepreneurship life through my experiences, right? So here, I wanted to see what the economics look like, what the macro look like, and say, okay, you know what? The chances in accounting of not succeeding are not that high, right? Like, you could do pretty well if you're an honest person, if you care about your clients, and you kind of know what you're doing.
So you started your business, and then the pandemic hits.
Yeah.
And you're out there. You're putting in the time. You're going at it pretty hard.
Yeah.
It went all according to plan?
Oh, no, exactly not according to plan.
So even the analyst, even the mind, even all of that stuff.
We had a whole strategic plan. My business partner was, we had a plan for him, based on our run rate,
right,
to join the business full time.
Yeah.
But of course, and we had a whole marketing plan. We're going to go out there, but once the pandemic hits, you're not doing any marketing because no one cares about buying from you. All they want to know is or to switch or make change, because so much change is thrust on you.
Right.
And so I don't want to change my accountants. That's the last thing I'm thinking about right now. And so I was thinking about at that moment was, other than replanning our cash flows, was for my partner and I to say, okay, he should stay at his role longer, and we had some arrangements around that, and then I would continue to service the clients that we had today and just do an awesome job for them. So we basically went like way above and beyond just for them. And honestly, that was the best thing that could have happened for us, because through them is how our business has grown since, through word of mouth and one after another. But I had also bought a house like in 6 months before the pandemic, like right around the time of the reorganization. And so that's another reason why a job would have been, much better, because I had this fixed cost every month that I had to manage. And so now with the pandemic, I had to obviously, it was a simple thing, Mohammed, and I don't even know if it's the right thing. But even a coffee, like I would not buy a Tim Hortons coffee. I said, until I am able to show that I'm at this level in terms of my family being taken care of and things, I'm not going to buy a Tim Hortons coffee. So my wife was like, okay, you've gone like a month without Tim Hortons coffee. Something's wrong with you, because you drink this thing every day. So she was like sponsoring my coffees there for a while.
That's amazing that you talk about that, but like you have the discipline to first of all pay attention to that, and to say that, okay, well, no, this is going to be, and then it acts as a motivator for you as well. So you've been keeping it real the whole time. But it's interesting you say having a job would have been better. But imagine if you had the job and didn't have this developed to this point, then finding out at that point in time, after you bought the house, expecting to have a regular job that's going to give you everything, then being told, now your position doesn't exist anymore, because that did happen to people.
Yes, and
So
especially,
can you imagine?
it's so true, especially during the pandemic. It's happened to so many people.
Right.
So you're so right. Like I think.
What would you have done? What do you do then?
What do you do then? I think that obviously I would have had a sense of regret in that moment for not having, made that decision. And then just kind of pick yourself up from there, just like the other times, right? And say, okay, now how do I move forward and find a business opportunity at that point?
Do you feel, and it's interesting because we've covered so much ground in terms of like where you started from to where you are now. When you look back, right, at that starting point, what would you change? Is there anything that you'd be like, hey, this is what I would change?
Yeah, I think
in terms of circumstances that you faced.
Oh, in terms of the actual circumstances, like what would I have changed?
Like if you were given a choice, hey, stammering condition, non-stammering.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean?
Okay,
like,
I see.
Do you think that would have?
No, I would want everything.
What do you mean?
Every single experience that I had,
No.
I would want
Including your
it
friend
all.
betraying you in
Yeah.
that grade 7 class, like you wouldn't have a memory like that. You wouldn't have the trauma.
Yeah, but that's
you're telling
that's
me
the
you're
trauma,
good with the trauma?
That's the trauma, right? That actually builds us up. It's, it's so cliche, but it's so true.
Okay.
Like those are the things. So last year in the summer,
Okay.
there was a Saturday, and I had a client and I had to do a bank reconciliation.
Okay.
I was off by like 5 cents.
Okay.
But I cannot let this thing be off by 5 cents because I want to reconcile it to the penny.
Sure.
Because that's a control. And I'm like, it's a beautiful Saturday. My kids and my wife are outside. I should be outside, like, hanging out with them.
If you were asking me on a Saturday, yeah, that's where you should be.
Or golfing or something,
yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Not doing a bank reconciliation
Not
in your
doing a
basement.
bank reconciliation on a Saturday.
And you
I'd
have
let
to
the client
remember as
go.
well, like, yeah, exactly. I have had a team for the last almost 10, 12 years
Yeah.
of people that are doing the work for me. This is me doing it on my own and on a Saturday after already working 12 hours a day for Monday to Friday. And I call my business partner up too, and I'm like, this is ridiculous, man. Like, what am I doing? And so you hit this kind of low for yourself. And then you realize the things you've had to go through in your life to get to the point you're at. You're like, suck it up, man. This is just one more thing. Look at where you can be 1 year from now if you achieve this thing. Because that's what you have done before.
Okay.
So all the pain you've gone through, and you've said, if I can survive that, and I can survive this, and I can survive that, what? This is like nothing, right?
Yeah, it's 5 cents.
I mean, it's 5 cents. And so there's other examples of that, like when the pandemic hits and you can't do your marketing and you just find a way through because you're like, but you've done this before. You've seen your father and the struggles they've gone through and how they've been creative and found ways forward, a lot of the inspiration is within yourself to be able to push forward. You don't have to, feel sorry or look to others. Just find a way forward yourself.
That's what I love about, your perspective on this, is that you could have chosen to feel sorry for yourself on all of these things. So you never ever had this sort of feeling of I'm a victim or something's wrong or why me. That's
Sorry,
amazing.
say it again.
So like even while you're going through this,
Yeah.
did you ever have that feeling?
Of like I'm a victim?
Yeah. Or feeling sorry for yourself?
No, I think
Really?
that
That's
one
amazing.
time about like that spy thing, I felt like I was on the outside.
Yeah.
Other than that,
Yeah.
I always felt like I'm part of something, even
Yeah.
if it's going through an experience.
Yeah.
I'm in that moment and I'm in that experience, right? So that experience, I have to find a way to leverage that
Yeah.
and make something positive out of it.
You remind me of a saying. I love these proverbs. There's one that says, one of my favorites, it says, we rise by lifting others.
Yes.
And you have, when I hear your recollection or your reflection, is that, you had this condition, and you've referred to it as a problem. I wouldn't call it a problem, but you had this condition, which actually put you later on into an advantage, but was seen initially perhaps as a disadvantaged position. Which is also why sometimes I argue about people who say that they're at a disadvantage.
That's right.
So anyway, that's a whole other thing. But, you had this, and instead of just looking at yourself, even in the midst of that, you looked at others, and you were trying to help them, people who had it worse than you. That's amazing. And that, by doing that, sort of gave you the relief also to not
Yes.
have to look at your situation sometimes,
Yeah,
and,
for sure.
and just focus on that. And by that kind of like, you develop your own strength, and then you're able to deal with your own. So instead of just dealing with your own condition and trying to find your progress, you're helping others to progress. Then you progress. I think that's an interesting chronology to it all.
Yeah, I have found that so many times, Mohammed, is like you just with people,
Yeah.
get to know them.
Yeah.
And actually, the quality,
Yeah.
the stammering quality, actually allows you to listen more.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to speak first. Speaking is not a super enjoyable thing when you've got this thing, right? So you stop speaking and you listen, you ask questions. So you learn how to ask better questions and to listen better, to then respond in a very clear and simple way. Although I am verbose a lot, I'm sure my wife will say, but I do.
Of course, she's your wife. That's
Yeah,
what
yeah,
your wife-
exactly.
She wouldn't be your wife.
Yeah,
She didn't
that's
say
right.
that. Right.
But I do notice that about myself. But with other people, like it's just way more enjoyable to build those connections and say, oh, so that's your strength and that's what you like. This other person likes that. Let's see if you guys can connect, or is there a way that we can share experiences? Yeah.
No, I love that, how it's seen as, some traumatic experiences you look at and wouldn't trade up for any of them, because therein lies, and I know it sounds cliche, but that's amazing that you're able to say that, because a lot of people, while they're in that moment, right, and going through that sort of experience, are really, we struggle in those moments to find what we need to do next, right, or how we're going to find our way forward from here. And your route is really, really different. It's really, really interesting. You didn't even look at your own problem. You're looking at somebody else's while you're there. And that got you through. That's really interesting. What else would you share with somebody who's going through it, or who you've seen has got it maybe worse?
I think a couple of things have really helped me as well. Reading has probably been one of them.
There it is again.
Yeah, like
Reading what?
Like I remember, like Anne Frank. Like when you read stuff that people
Anne
have, like when people have to go through, like these Holocaust camps and what they have to endure, and then I think it was like Viktor Frankl, and it's like just man's ability to hope beyond reason, and where that can take you. And I was like, wow, if you guys can do that, then I can probably do this. Traveling is the other thing, right? For sure, is you go to Cambodia and you see the prisons that were there and how people were treated. And then you go into different countries and you see the beauty of things that people have built, like the pyramids. And you say like people are capable of a lot of evil and of a lot of good. And you really have to engage with them and find a way to, maybe influence them in a way positively, so that you influence as many people positively as you can, because there is a potential for good or for evil in everyone, because you've seen this diverse range out there, right? And the other thing too is as well, it breaks all these stereotypes for me. I feel like when you grow up with your parents' assumptions and biases.
Right.
It's like, don't hang out with these people because they are different, or they might do things to you. And then when you grow up, you're like, wow, that was like so many assumptions and biases. Now when I travel and I see those same people in another context doing amazing things, like, okay, that's changed my perspective on people. And now I'm just like all about just trying to get to know people. And it's so much more fun that way when you're more open to that. Yeah.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, so fun talking to you.
I think it's every day we meet people, and just off of like circumstance, right? We just happen to be picked by the same guy. What was he thinking? Right?
Right, so true.
Some other sort of opportunity putting us together on the same team. And it was just, I think, only 1 year maybe one summer.
It was only one summer, and I remember getting back into entrepreneurship, and when I saw your name pop up on my LinkedIn feed somehow, and I got in touch, and I was like, I am going to meet this guy, right? If there's anybody I'm going to meet, I'm going to meet you.
And now we're going to go back to playing soccer again.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Because I'm ready for it.
Okay, let's do it. I love that.
Thank